While I'm getting all set up here, let me just ask you to think about something. Our two elders are sick today. We have two elders and two elders only to shepherd our souls. Today has been a day without them. You noticed this morning that I was standing alone at the invitation song up there. Usually we have an elder on each side. I want you to think about how that felt. I want you to think very deeply about that. We pray our two shepherds will get well soon and be back with us. But doesn't that make you feel as though we are teetering on a precarious situation in the congregation? And I'm saying that because I want all of the men, from boys to men, to begin thinking about that. Some might be 20, 30, 40 years away from becoming an elder. Some might be 5 years away. Some might be ready but have not stepped forward. I'd just like you to be thinking about that. These men need some help. And this is a big load for them to carry. And to see both of them on the sick list today and not with us, it's a strange feeling. So we wish them well. They're probably watching us tonight, and our prayers are with them as they are with all of our Christian family who struggle with some difficulties in health and well-being and are on a sick list and trying to recover. And we care deeply for them, and we miss them quite a bit. And so I want you to be thinking about that, especially young men, be thinking that direction, and what a shortage there is of men who will serve as elders. It is a difficult thing, and it's a big load, and few want to carry it on their shoulders, but it is needed desperately. And so be thinking, be praying, and be ready, because a time will come and is here when you are really needed to step into a role like that. Now, I don't know how many of you remember, it's been a week or two or three ago, that I mentioned to you when we finished our series in the book of Romans, we would be starting a brand new series. And that brand new series is here. It is Parenting in Proverbs, God's handbook on parenting. I've got to tell you, as we get started, this little notebook here has been one of my favorites for many years. And where I first came up with this was when my mother was still alive, and she was attending the Cloverdale Church of Christ in Searcy, Arkansas. Don Shackelford was one of the elders there, and he was teaching a Bible class. And that Bible class was in the book of Proverbs. And my mom was handed a copy of this. This is a topical index for the book of Proverbs. And it is the best topical index I've ever run across. It was created by C. Mark Miller, who was on staff at York College at the time. Now I believe it's York University. And he created that. And I actually called him and talked to him about it at one point some years ago. And he told me I could go ahead and make a copy of that and use it. So I did. And it has been, when it comes to the book of Proverbs, it's been my right hand to be able to go through here and look up topics. Might be on parenting, might be on stealing, might be on the sluggard, might be on, whatever topic you can think of in the book of Proverbs, and it groups them up for you so you can go through the book of Proverbs very quickly and find those particular subjects. And that's the way I had approached the book of Proverbs. That's the way many people have approached the book of Proverbs. A bunch of scattered statements of wisdom on various topics. We would consider them standalone topics, hard to outline the book of Proverbs, because you have all these scattered topics all over the place in there. And maybe you would find something in there would be good for a church sign like ours out in the front of the building here, where you want to put something short, a pithy statement on there from the Bible, and you might find a proverb that would fit that sort of scenario. Last year, August, polishing the pulpit, Gwen and I, along with Eli, Catherine, and their kids, attended that series of lectures. And on Sunday morning, in Sevierville, Tennessee, there's a congregation of God's people. And we always will go there on Polishing the Pulpit Sunday morning for services. You can go to services. There are worship services arranged all over for those some 5,000 people. But we like the Sevierville congregation, and I always get a good lesson there. I always enjoy it, get something from it, and for me it's a really highlight of the trip. And Alan Hires was preaching Sunday morning, and Rob Whitaker was doing the Bible class that morning. And Rob Whitaker is really high on evangelism. He is hired for that purpose and goes around the country teaching personal evangelism. Well, he was there that Sunday morning, but he was teaching on the book of Proverbs. And about 5 minutes into that Bible class, it totally changed my outlook of the book of Proverbs. And it made more sense to me than it ever did before. And that is a series of lessons that I want to share with you. Now, Rob Whitaker did that in about 45 minutes that he had for class. He presented that at rapid pace. And I'm going to spend at least 4 or 5 weeks going through it in a mini-series here in the book of Proverbs. And if we go beyond that, well, I don't know yet. I haven't developed that far, but I've got 4 or 5 lessons in mind, and we'll go at least that far. We want to begin to move through the book of Proverbs and follow a reasoning that's there. The Bible tells us that it provides God's knowledge and wisdom for life. In 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 3, seeing that His divine power has granted to us everything pertaining to life and godliness through the true knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and excellence. Through the true knowledge of Him, knowledge preserved in our Bibles for us, God has provided for us everything, not some things, but everything pertaining to life and godliness, everything that we need. 2 Timothy 3, verses 16 and 17 is another familiar passage. All Scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be adequate, equipped for every good work. Not some, but every good work. It sounds pretty thorough. Between those two passages, God provides for us in Scripture everything that we need for life, every part of life, every facet of life, and for godliness. That's going to include a lot more than the fundamentals. Scripture is going to complete us for everything, and that includes our homes, our families, our marriages, the bringing up of our children. And most of us could begin to think of a passage or 2 or 3 about parenting. You might think of a couple in the book of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy chapter 6, Deuteronomy chapter 11, or Ephesians chapter 6, Colossians chapter 3. Maybe some of those are familiar to you that talk about parenting, about fathers, about children, about fathers and mothers, and how children should obey their parents in the Lord, how fathers should teach their children as they rise up, as they lie down, as they go out through the gates. But Proverbs is usually never thought about in that way. Most have never considered the book of Proverbs as devoted to that particular theme. What we want to do is we want to find the purpose in the Proverbs. Proverbs announces its own purpose in the very beginning. And if you have the book of Proverbs open, we will begin in chapter 1 and verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth, And there it begins to touch on it. To the younger generation, to the next generation, to the ones coming up, to those who don't know yet, to the youth, to give them this knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear an increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. To understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. And then I want you to give special attention to this next line. Verse 8. Hear. H-E-A-R, with your ears. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. That is not an isolated thought. My son, hear my son, this is for you, my children. It's not isolated here. This isn't just a nice introduction. This is the purpose of the book of Proverbs. Hear, my son, your father's instruction. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. I want you to, if you're open to the book of Proverbs, very quickly with me, I want you to notice something. And this is how we're going to go through this series. Chapter 1, verse 8, hear my son. Verse 10, my son. Verse 15, my son. Chapter 2, verse 1, my son. Chapter 3, verse 1, my son. Chapter 3, verse 11, my son. Verse 21, my son. Chapter 4, verse 1, hear, O sons. Verse 10, hear, my son. Verse 20, my son. Chapter 5, verse 1, my son. This is an outline of the book of Proverbs. This is about a father imparting wisdom to his son. We can adapt that to our sons, to our daughters, to our children. This is God's handbook on parenting. This is a father training his child in the way that he should walk and how he should go about life. How to avoid pitfalls. How to find the best this or the best that, or the purpose of life. And every time we run across that phrase, my son, or my children, or hear my sons, it's introducing something new, something important, something instructive. And so we need to start looking at what follows that. And that becomes the layout of the book of Proverbs. If you've never before run across an outline for the book of Proverbs, it outlines itself. Each of these is introducing some topic that we need to be familiar with. God began the family unit in the Garden of Eden. Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, then Seth. God organized that. God created that. He established it. But it wasn't very long in the Garden of Eden before the devil comes in through the serpent and begins to tear that apart. And pretty soon you see Cain killing his brother Abel, and there's division in the human family. In the words of Rob Whitaker from that lesson on that Sunday morning that I listened to, there is a war going on for the souls of our families, for the souls of our children. But God has not left us to fight that battle alone. He has provided for us the guidance that we need to save the souls of our children, to save the souls of our family. If we'll just listen, if we will lead our families according to His direction. Evangelism begins in the home. It begins with our own children. We have to be involved. We have to initiate. We have to be active with that. There are things throughout the book of Proverbs that Solomon is teaching and training in specifically. He's talking to his son. His son's going to be on the throne after him. What kind of a king is he going to be? What kind of a husband is he going to be? What kind of a wife is he going to find? What kind of friends is he going to form? These are all concerns that he has, and he talks to his son about that, and he leaves them this history, this record that we know of as Scripture in the book of Proverbs. Finding the key to the book of Proverbs is something that once you find it, once you find this kind of outline in the book, once you see that, you'll never see the book of Proverbs the same again. It just begins to unfold in meaning as you walk through that. It is God's inspired handbook for parenting. Now, I've already mentioned to you this important thread in the book of Proverbs. And you'll find that in those phrases, my son. This is 31 chapters, something like 915 verses. And 25 times, at least in the New American Standard Translation, you will find my son. You'll find the term son 55 times. Child or children is found 8 times. Father is used 26 times. Mother is used 14 times. House, as the abode of a person or a family, is used 29 times. This is the theme of the book of Proverbs. Once you notice that, you can't unsee it. It'll stick with you forever. This is a book about raising godly children, about having godly marriages and godly families. You want to raise your children to save their souls? Read God's handbook on parenting. Get real familiar with that. If you want your family to look like God designed it to be, give great attention to the book of Proverbs. There are other passages in the Bible that will talk about families and marriages and children and parenting, but this is a focus. It is a laser on that particular subject. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. Be of sober spirit. Be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Guess how many days a week the devil takes off? Listen, when you say, oh, I'm glad Monday's a holiday, not the devil. He's at it 24/7, every day of the week, night and day, while you're awake, while you sleep. He is prowling around looking for someone to devour. And from the Garden of Eden, we know he's after our children. So we can't relax this. We can't just think that we're safe, because we're not. How many days are filled with influence on our children from a world that does not know or respect our God? Every day they're facing that. Now you have this thread that ties the book of Proverbs together, and we're going to begin watching how it outlines itself as we begin to move through it. If you're listening to this, if you've never seen the book of Proverbs this way, and you're listening to this, and your family is young, you've got to be thinking, wow, this is really great timing. And maybe dads are thinking, this is going to make great stuff for family devotionals. I've been wondering about some material for that. Well, here it is. We just need to get familiar with it. And every time you find that phrase in the book of Proverbs, what's the subject material? What's it talking about? How's it talking about it? What's he trying to tell his son at that particular place? If your family's grown, begin where you are with your grown children, maybe with your grandchildren. And if you don't have that opportunity, think about how you can encourage these things in a congregational setting. There's little kids running around here all the time. We're teaching them, we're training them, we're supporting that family, we're supporting those parents. And we want to instill those kinds of truths from God's book that we're going to be able to find in our study in the book of Proverbs. Now, I just want to introduce this looking a little closer at Proverbs chapter 1, and that phrase, my son, is going to be leading the way. And we're going to run across that. And every time we do, mark that down so that you don't lose it. If you don't have a Bible program or you don't have the ability to open something up to help you to find that phrase, my son or father or mother or children, then as we go through that and you spot it, you want to mark that down in some way so that you don't forget it's there. I highlight in my Bible. I will underline in my Bible. I'll make notations like that so I can see it at a glance the next time I look at it. If you're opposed to that, then you need some paper and pencil with you as you go through this. Proverbs 1 and verse 8, one more time. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Please don't pass over that quickly. We've just been taught something very important in verse 8. We've just been initiated into this wisdom that's being imparted in this book for us. I want you to put it together first with the verse just prior to it, verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So here's a mother and a father. My son, hear your father's instruction. Don't forsake your mother's teaching. What are they teaching? What are they instructing in? This is the fear of the Lord. This is the groundwork. This is the bedrock of what they're instilling in their children. The fear of the Lord. And they're challenging their children now. Listen to this and choose to be this kind of a person. Make this the first footprints you put in life, the fear of the Lord, respect for God and for the Bible, for His people, and live life that way. So parents aren't just teaching anything. They are teaching particularly about the fear of the Lord. If you want to raise children to learn to fear the Lord, it's going to require godly parents with total, complete dedication to God, His book, and His people. That's the parents that are going to have this kind of influence. It's going to sound a little bit like Ephesians 6 and verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. I want you to notice something else. If you're going to raise children this way, what does it take? It takes a father's instruction and a mother's teaching. It takes both. It takes a mom and a dad. That is God's design for the family. He never designed the family to be without a father and a mother. He chose Joseph and Mary for a reason. He chose Zacharias and Elizabeth to raise John for a reason. It's the design for the home. Sometimes tragedy strikes and it removes a father from the family or it removes a mother from the family. Sometimes the tragedy strikes and there's nothing you can do about it. But may it never be a choice. May it never be a preference that we would have a single parent home instead of a mother and a father. They both bring something unique to that situation. Raising children in the home that God designed, that should be our preference. Please don't just live together without getting married. Please don't just live together, fornicate, and expect, oh, it's just going to turn out all right. It won't turn out all right. That's not God's design. That's not the godly mother and the godly father that God designed the family with. Please don't do that. You're not starting children off the right way. You're not starting husband and wife off on the best footing. Please don't make God a sporadic punctuation in family life. Hit or miss. Maybe we'll go to church this week, maybe not Wednesday night, maybe next Sunday, maybe not, maybe Sunday night, maybe we'll do something else. Don't make God a sporadic punctuation in the family and think, oh, it's just all going to turn out all right. That's not the godly father and mother that God's talking about in the book of Proverbs. They're going to have this kind of influence in the lives of their children. They are a powerful influence together. They bring something different to the table. They balance each other. Together, there is a fullness in God's design. What a wonderful way to start the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. What you hear in that is that the children are taught to respect their parents. And there is respect of the husband for his wife and respect of the wife for her husband. You're hearing all of that in that single verse. Now you move down to verse 10. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. What did he just tell his son? Son, there's some people you ought not to hang around with. There's some people that you ought not to keep company with. It's not going to turn out well if you do. There are some people who are in self-destruct mode. And if you hang around with them, they're going to pull you down with them. Parents, do you know who your children are hanging around with? Do you know what they're doing when they're hanging around with them? Do you know what kind of language they use? Do you know what they watch on TV? Do you know what they think is funny? Parents, do you know where your children are and who they are with? That's sort of a lost art and expectation in the modern family in a lot of cases. Many today think that's a very antiquated, over-strict idea, and you're depriving your children and you're telling them you just don't trust them. Well, get rid of that. That modern thinking is garbage. We need to know who our kids are with and what they're doing and what kind of friends they're keeping, and we need to be in charge of that. Even if they're with Christian young people, just young people who wear the name Christian, it's not enough. What kind of Christian are they? Are they a faithful Christian? Are they a godly Christian? Do they aim at the Bible? Do they actually walk that path? Just because they're with a youth group of the church, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good group to be with. We've probably all seen good and bad in that situation. We need to know what kind of kids they're hanging around with. Who are their peers? Follow that down to verse 15. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your feet from their path. Their feet run to evil, and they hasten to shed blood. Indeed, it is useless to spread the baited net in the sight of any bird. If a bird sees you spread the net for it, it's going to be smarter than that. It's not going to go there. Verse 18, but these ones that you ought not to hang around with, they lie in wait for their own blood. They lay a trap for themselves. They ambush their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who gains by violence. It takes away the life of its possessors. The wrong crowd is the path of self-destruction, and you can lose your children right there. This whole section is about the kind of friendships your child forges, and you're the parent. You either permit it or you forbid it. And so sometimes there's a battle in the home because a parent says, you can't hang around them. You can't go over to their house. You can't go to this place with them. We don't want you to hang around that person. And the child gets all flustered about that, and maybe some harsh things are said, and a parent doesn't want to be the bad guy, and they want to be liked by their kids. It's not about being liked by your kids. It's about saving their souls. And it starts in things just like that. So be the parent. Don't just be the best buddy. Be the parent and help guide them the right direction. And it begins in chapter 1 with picking friends correctly. Yes, there will come an age where as a parent you're not in charge of that anymore. But you are for a while, and for the while that you are, make sure you teach them the right way to do that and the things to value in other people. How many times have you heard someone talk about the day their child went wrong because they were hanging around the wrong crowd? Who let them hang around the wrong crowd? We are in charge of those kinds of things. We begin with a call to be godly parents and to begin on solid footing with God before children are ever in the picture. Who are you while you're dating someone? What kind of Christian are you? What kind of Christian are they? Well, they believe in God. Is that enough for you? Is that the low bar that you're going to set? Well, they believe in God. Are they a member of the New Testament church? Well, do you mean the Church of Christ? Yes, I do. The church that belongs to Christ is the church of the New Testament. Yeah, that's what I mean. Are they a Christian? Are you a Christian? What kind of Christian are you? What kind of Christian are they? This begins to be the foundation for the children that will come into the picture one day. Don't start them off with a handicap. Start life out right. Start it out in that dating process. Do you pray on a date? Do you do godly things on a date? Do you do sinful, immoral things on a date? And then go to church on Sunday? And nobody's the wiser? What kind of Christian are you? What kind of Christian is the person you're dating? This is going to be the mother and father of the children in that relationship. This is going to be the person you're going to marry. You're going to marry someone that you're dating. So we begin with that. And then we begin with a direction for our children that they would learn in word, deed, instruction. Example, at home, there's a lot of communication about God in that household. And there is an early warning about choosing their friends carefully. We begin guiding them in that in the youngest years of their life. And as they graduate from one age to another, from elementary school to a middle school to a high school, we're still guiding them along that way and pointing things out to them. And there might be some battles of will in that. Make sure God wins in all of that. Now that I've given you a starting place and a thread in the book of Proverbs, and to start looking for those key phrases, you really don't need me for the rest of it. You can open up the book of Proverbs and you can start hunting those things and underlining them or highlighting them, and you're going to go, oh, what topic is that? What's he talking about here? And all of a sudden you're outlining the book of Proverbs yourself. But we'll share a few more lessons like this, because sometimes when you do that, you miss some things that are in there. And so we'll do a few more lessons together in the book of Proverbs and help you to get a good, steady pathway of going through it before we end it. I hope this has been helpful to you. This is time to get your priorities right with God. Make sure He's leading the way, first in your own life. Make sure that is the bond in your marriage. And then if you have not done that in earnest yet with the children in your home, start. It's already later than you think. But make sure your priorities are right with God tonight. And if they're not, all of that matters. And we're here to help and encourage. We offer the invitation to you tonight, whether it's about this lesson or about something else in your life that you need to remedy with God, prayers of the church that you request. We're here to help each other. We're helping each other to get to heaven. We're trying to support each other in that. And sometimes we get weary, and sometimes we make mistakes. Let's help each other to stand up straight and strong. If we can help you tonight, please come forward while we stand and sing.